Just a quick summary of last week. We talked about the fact that everyone is a leader. We talked about the many different ways that leaders can and need to work to gain the trust of those they're trying to lead. We talked about the fact that leaders have to get it in their brain that change is going to happen and it's going to be a part of what they lead people through. And the whole concept of helping people be comfortable in the midst of change. We talked a little bit about the angst of change. We're going to talk about that more tonight. So let's get started. Anytime there is change, there's going to be resistance. I told you the story about our computer exchange at the bank the year that Kathy and I got married. I wasn't happy about that, but sometimes that's just how it has to go. There's a wonderful quote. In fact, there's a little book my sister gave me called Common Sense for Community Change. The author is Julie Battle, and I don't know about you, but I'm always asking people, what are you reading? Because when you meet somebody that is like got a good brain and you like how they think and you find out what they're reading, the best books I have found someone else was reading and they just happened to pass on the title and the author. And my sister sent me this little book. It's not really a Christian book, but I love this quote. Even the most confident people will tell you that they were uneasy, that they had their doubts, but they pushed through it. They gathered the facts, surrounded themselves with good people, anticipated the naysayers, and stayed the course. We expect resistance. It's important to just know that going in, that there are going to be forces that come against you. It's easier for us to stay with the old ideas, harder to move to new. John Maynard Keynes has a somewhat famous quote, "The difficulty lies not so much in developing new ideas as in escaping from the old ones." It's sometimes hard to get people even to want to be willing to leave Egypt, whatever their comfort was. In dealing with change, the angst of it, it's important to limit resistance by pacing change. In other words, they tell pastors when you go to a new appointment, now don't make any changes for a year. And some pastors take that advice and some don't. But whether they do or not, the importance of staging and regulating the amount of pain you put a group of people through is very important. I've been here 18 years. I think we've had 4 building campaigns. So if they're each 3 years long, that's like 3 years that we didn't have a campaign. Well, the good news is that's 3 years that we didn't have a building campaign. Because some churches will get themselves in a position financially where they're paying for the building with concurrent campaigns. And people need a break in between. They need some time to regain their composure and take a deep breath. So whatever it is that you're putting on your folks, rewrite the manual a little bit at a time. Don't try to do it all at once. We talked last time about how leaders bring calm to a storm, and probably all of you have been in situations in organizations at work or at the church where there was a painful time, and we've had some here at our church, try to avoid them, try to negotiate them out, try to keep them from happening, but sometimes they do. And I love this idea, the second point here, that the real golden age of any organization is not its heyday. It's the hard work behind the scenes that made the heyday possible. And if you come to this building on Sunday morning and see the musicians, and it's just full. And when did we open it? On Easter? What was that? March? April? April. It was April this year. That's the 4th month. That was 4 months ago. 4 months ago, if you'd have told us this place would be thriving, I'd have said, yay, that's great. But if you come in here right now and you think, oh my gosh, look how wonderful it is. Okay, great, that's true. But what really makes for wonderful moments are the people and the times and the moments when, against all odds, you're fighting upstream to keep doing the right thing. So sometimes the glory days, we'll talk about the Royals winning the pennant, but what was the hard work along the way that made that possible? If you're a leader, you're going to open yourself for criticism, and this is why a lot of people shy away from being a leader. You step out in front, your boss says you just got a promotion, you're now in charge of these things. You make yourself a target. In fact, just get a shirt, put a Target on it. They may sell them at Target. Understand that you're going to get hurt. You're going to hear the little squabble coming up along the way that somebody doesn't like you or somebody's unhappy with you. And if you're like me, that hurts. In fact, next Sunday, the sermon is about two very obscure judges. And the point of the sermon coming up is that God uses people that are little known and really don't have great stories to tell. But for most of us to be thrust in a leadership role, and then you start getting criticism, you think, wait, stop. I didn't mean to get everybody all upset. I'm just trying to do that. Well, you have to understand that criticism is going to come your way. And there are a lot of different ways that we respond to criticism. One way that we do that is to shut down. Andrew, you're back, so you're in it again. Andrew criticizes me. Fine. You know what? I'm not doing that anymore. Okay? That last capital campaign was so hard, I'm not doing another one. Sean can lead the next one. I've actually said that. There's a wonderful little story about asking kindergartners how many of them are artists. Almost all of them raise their hands. Ask second graders how many of them are artists. Well, a third. By the time we get to fifth or sixth grade, no one will raise their hand because so many people have had their work made fun of. One of our human responses to criticism is to step back, and as a leader, you can't do it. You can't hide from the difficulty of the moment. Another response is to categorize people and make lists. Well, those folks are against us because they're this or they're that. And all of a sudden, we've made T-shirts for folks and told them, well, they're in that camp, so they're going to. And it's very easy to draw lines and end up with a situation where you have folks that are for and against. And I passed up this quote a minute ago. Let's see if we can go back. Proverbs 16:7. When a woman's ways are pleasing to the Lord, he makes even his enemies to live at peace with him. I think by human nature, we want to shy away from the people that don't get us or don't agree with what we're trying to do, and we label them. But a successful leader has to try to reach into the minds and hearts of people that are different than you are, that don't see it the way that you see it. The third thing we like to do when we get hurt is to hurt somebody back. And we talked about that this morning. It's just not constructive. If it's an employment situation, you can fire them. But is that really what you want to do every time somebody does something that upsets you? Is that what we want to do every time someone hurts us? There are employers that act that way, but it's really not constructive for long-term relationships. Leaders have to learn how to forgive. We talked last week about the fact that being a leader is different than being in charge. When we think of ourselves as being in charge, well, I'm just going to say how it is, and everybody's just going to have to figure it out my way. Well, that doesn't draw people into the system. If you really want people to own what you're doing, you have to make allowances for them and learn to forgive the fact that sometimes they're going to come in your office and blow their stack. Or sometimes they're going to blow their stack to somebody else, and you've got to sit down and help them work through it. In fact, if you're going to be a leader, you need to really be a student of forgiving. You have the chance to set the culture in the workplace or the home or the church or wherever it is. And all of us have experiences of places where the culture was a disaster. My kids are kind of been going through the college jobs and now the jobs in the real world thing. And the stories that I hear of things that happen in their workplace and the amount of turnover that they have and some of the people that they promote, and it's just incredible that some people don't understand how important it is to shape culture. And if you're a leader, you have a chance to do that, and you do that by forgiving people every time you can. Forgiveness means that I refuse to make them pay for what they did. It breaks my heart when I go to a restaurant and you'll see some frantic server because they had a walkout, right? Is that what they call it? What do they call that, Sean? A walkout? I mean, somebody didn't pay and they just snuck out, right? Dine and dash, right? And here's this server, this 19, 20-year-old kid that has to pay for their bill. And I'm thinking, wow. Forgiving someone means you find a way to help them work through it without punishing them. And anytime we refrain from lashing out, from hurting someone back, it hurts us, because by nature, what we want to do is call them in and straighten them out. When my boss, and it's happened, has called me up and wanted me to do something different and didn't like what I was doing, boy, I just want to lash out, And we have to fight that human nature if we're going to keep those relationships intact. And to hold that in is a kind of agony. It's a kind of suffering. And when you forgive someone, when you decide that this person is more important than this thing, and it's a really good thing to remember that people are more important than ideas, that the relationships with the people that you work with are so very, very valuable, you start absorbing a lot of the debt. Leaders absorb pain. You take the cost of whatever it is completely upon yourself instead of lashing out at the other person. It's a kind of suffering. This is going to be in the Easter sermon in 2013. If I'm still alive on Easter, I hope to be. Parker Palmer says, the cross says the pain stops here. No more lashing out. The cross is a way of absorbing the pain, not taking it on. And I would encourage you as a Christian to understand that your Christianity doesn't turn off when you walk out the door on Sunday morning. That wherever you are in the workplace or at the DMV, and Lord knows that's a difficult place to be a Christian, the Christian principles are always in play. The cross is a way of absorbing pain, not passing it on. Jesus said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And when we transform the pain of a situation into something positive, we create opportunities. The cross, God does that through Jesus on the cross, creating a wonderful, positive opportunity for us. Imagine when you have a child, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker, and you call them into your office and they're expecting the worst. And you find a way to express to them good news. It doesn't mean that you don't walk through what it is, but you do it in a way that values them and points them in the right direction. And anytime we can do that, if you catch the picture of that, of the amount of power that you have in relationships to heal people, then I would hope that you would see you have wonderful opportunities to do God's work and to be a leader. When Jesus accepted the cross, his death opened up a channel for the redeeming power of love. And we as God's people, it's not just that we're punching our ticket for heaven, we are joining in this stream of being redeemers, people that care, people that lead with grace. And the amazing work of God comes into play when we choose to act in love instead of in vindictive ways. And one of the things I've told my kids when they tell me horrible stories about the place that they work, I say, well, here's what you can learn from this. Never do that to someone else. And someday, it's hard for them to imagine, I mean, they're 25 and 23 and unemployed, but the 21-year-old is unemployed. But someday, they will have more opportunities than they do now. And when you get those, that is when you remember what happened to you and you say, never. I'll tell you a story. I don't think I've ever told this in church. And one of the things that's kind of fun about being here is I feel like I can tell you some things that I wouldn't tell on Sunday morning. When I was in seminary, a new pastor was assigned to the church where I was the youth minister, and the staff parish committee sent me off to find the records of his appointments. And they happened to have all the conference journals at the seminary. So I went up and I pulled them all out, and I found the year that he started and went through year after year after year. And in 11 years, he was in 10 churches. And when I reported that back, that the new guy that's coming in has had quite a record of here, there, and yon, they kind of knew what was coming. And maybe just by that, we didn't give him a very good start. But he was tough on me. Once he called me about 5 o'clock in the evening on a Sunday and said, "You need to come over to the church. We need to talk to you." I said, "Who's we?" "Well, me and the staff parish chair." "Oh, is everything okay?" "Yeah, everything's okay." Well, everything wasn't okay, and I got there and I got, it wasn't very much fun. But another time, it was Sunday morning. He would always check in the bulletin what he wanted me to do, the Apostles' Creed or whatever liturgy it was. And in that church, it was more formal. He sat by the pulpit in the holy chair, and I sat on the other side of the altar by the lectern in the other holy chair. And it was time for this certain thing to happen, and it hadn't been checked on my bulletin, so I didn't get up to do it. And so he's looking. And I'm just kind of scared of him all the time anyway. So finally he gets up and he does it. And after church, in front of about 10 people, he's giving me the riot act. And I said, "Look, you didn't mark it. I'm sorry, I just did what I thought you wanted me to do." Well, so we learn from those things that we will never treat someone. So if you look back and you have those painful moments, use those as opportunities to do better for someone else. Leaders empower others. This is so very, very important. Again, it's not the concept of being in charge. It's about helping others, inviting them into the missions. Leaders identify successful managers and lieutenants, people that you can train and let them go and let them do it. There's a great scripture passage in Exodus 18 where Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, who started out as a priest of Midian and was kind of a pagan priest, ends up running with Moses and spending some time in the desert, and I think probably comes along and begins to believe in the Lord. But he comes to Moses because Moses is receiving all of the complaints and the problems of the people, and Jethro comes to him and says, "Moses, you can't do this alone. You just can't do this by yourself. You need to appoint captains and lieutenants and assign them this work so that you can do the things that you need to do." Two wonderful books on this topic. One of them is called The Flight of the Buffalo, and I brought all of these books last week to show you, and I forgot them in the office today. But The Flight of the Buffalo is a wonderful book. It's by a guy named Belasco, and the main thesis of the book is the reason that early cowboys were able to slaughter the herds of buffalo is because they learned that there was a lead buffalo. And if they figured out which one it was and they killed it, all the other buffalo would just stand around and eat the grass and take the bullet. And so they'd kill the lead buffalo and slaughter the herd. And of course, the Indians then didn't have anything to eat, and on they went. He contrasts that kind of leadership where there's only one person in charge with a flock of geese. And I'm sure you've heard this before, but you know when there's a flock of geese and they're flying in a V, and you know why one side of the V is longer than the other? There's more geese on that side. Sorry. When a flock of geese are flying in a V, they take turns. And so one will take the lead and the others will draft off of the lead goose, and then that goose will fall back and another goose will take its turn. It's a gander. And think about, I think what comes naturally as humans is to think, well, I'm in charge, so I'll lead this. But the more people that we can have taking ownership in what we're doing, the stronger an organization is. The other book is a wonderful book, especially if you're interested in technology, because there's wonderful stories in it about how the internet developed and what happened to Napster and file sharing. But this author, and his name is Ori Brafman, Brafman, He talks about spider organizations where there's one person in charge, and if you step on the head, all the legs die because they don't know what to do. Contrasting that with a starfish, where if you cut it in half, it will live. There will be two. Now, it will be ugly. It won't be an attractive starfish, but they live because the vital organs are replicated in all of the legs. So if you get one leg and enough of the middle, that thing can live. So how do we generate DNA in the people that we're working with? Talk to the staff sometimes, and I find out that they were meeting with somebody, and they said, well, Jeff wants us to do it that way. And I say, no. This isn't why we're doing what we're doing. If that's why we're doing what we're doing, then we need to talk harder about what we're doing. Just because Jeff thinks it ought to be that way can't be the answer. What is our mission? And if all of you together can tell me that what you think we should do for our mission is different than what I think, then I'm with you because I'm for our mission. I want them to go out and enlist people to the cause based on what the mission is. Anytime you have a setting, your home, your marriage, your employment place, deciding what the core driving principle is so very, very important. And when you can get people to rally around that pulls them forward in the right direction, and you can kind of get yourself a little bit out of the way and a little bit out of the line of fire. Now, as a leader needs to empower others, one of the most painful things I think about being a leader is when you have to call someone in and say, I love you. It kind of looked like this, okay? But in the future, we need it to look like that. I don't know about you, but my stomach just goes until I get that over with. David Cottrell, in his book, Monday Morning Leadership, and this is a wonderful little book with 7 or 8 lessons on leadership, he talks about the importance of having those discussions. He says, don't sacrifice the vision to accommodate a few. Challenge poor performance. Work for long-term results, not short-term. Do not allow a department to generate negative momentum. Isn't that an interesting phrase? I mean, it says something about our leadership if we're allowing someone or a group of people to generate negative momentum. Your leadership is critical to this. People are not dumb. They can tell if there's a white elephant in the room. They know. So deal with the things that need to be dealt with, and you'll find them painful, I'm sure. We know the song, Let Your Light Shine. Leaders try to let the lights of other people shine. And I'm going to get some of this out of the way, but or out of order, because in a couple of slides, there's one of my favorite lines. Let me go find it. Leaders take responsibility, but give credit. And this may be, as far as I'm concerned, one of the most important things a person can learn about leadership. If Sherry Swanson's not here tonight, so I'll pick on Sherry. If we have something happen in the church, and we never have because Sherry's never made any mistakes ever, but if we do, and you ask me about it, I'm not going to tell you, Sherry really goofed that up. I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to say, okay, you know what? You're right. And I'm going to work on that, and I'm sorry that we let you down. I'm not going to throw that employee under the bus. Leaders take responsibility. They absorb the pain. They don't throw their people under the bus. On the other hand, if you've been working on some project and someone else is involved in a small way, and you come up to me and say, oh my goodness, Sherry Swanson's a genius. Look what she's doing. And I know Sherry Swanson really only did about this much, and I did most of it. I'm not going to say, well, I did most of it. Come on, really? What are you thinking? Here's how this went. Allow the people to have credit for the things that they do and for the success of the organization. If somebody comes to church here and somebody's preaching that hardly ever gets to preach, and they say, oh my gosh, this church is awesome. Did you hear that great? They don't even know that's a visiting person, right? They didn't know that was Mike Scott preaching his first time. Just say, yep, yeah, that was great, wasn't it? Take the pain, take the responsibility, give the credit, give the joy. Your people will love you for it. And I will tell you, if your people love you, you can walk through hell and back. They will stand by your side because they know you have their back and you really care for them. So it's not just about my light shining. It's about everybody's light shining. And when they get to let their light shine, then I'm not having to do everything. They're doing some things too. And it's important as a leader to let your AAs or the people around you do what they can do. If you don't, you're going to do it all yourself. I find myself on occasion heading to the copy machine with a bunch of papers, and then I realize this is going to take me 20 minutes, and there's someone here that could probably do this, that would probably like to help me. Why was I doing that? Because that's how I was raised, right? If you want something done right, do it yourself, right? And don't bother the people. Just go get it done, By the time I get them in and explain it to them, well, what ends up happening if we don't delegate those things is you never get to spend the time on things that only you can do. So look through your things, get a hold of the folks that need to do them, let them do them, celebrate those things that they're doing so that you have time to work on a sermon or plan the next sermon series or talk about whatever our goals are 6 months from now. I also found this in David Cottrell's book, and I thought it was a pretty poignant piece about what it meant to be a leader, kind of an ultimate statement. He is saying, and this is really chapter 1 in his book, that there are drivers and passengers. Passengers get to fool around in the car. Drivers cannot. If you're a manager or a leader of people, there are some things you can no longer do because you're a driver. And here's an interesting list. You can't join others' pity parties. You can't blame others. You must work for solutions. You must take responsibility for everything. He says if you want to be extraordinary, then you must choose to stop being ordinary. One must be willing to change in order to achieve success. Leaders bring out the best in people. They invite people to see in themselves what you see. And I hope that you have, I believe it's a gift actually, to see somebody and to think, wow, that person has potential. I hope that sometimes you're around people and you have that feeling. Tell them, get a hold of them and help them to begin to believe in themselves. Our egos are so crushed down by life by the time we're 25. It's no wonder that no one wants to lead. Leaders help other people see the gifts in them. There is a night in Disciple Bible Study 1. By the way, if you've not taken Disciple Bible Study, it's an awesome course, and I would encourage all of you to do that. But towards the end, it may be the last or the next to the last week, they have Gifts Night. And so you're sitting in a circle with 15 people. How many of you have done this? Okay. And they go around the room, and you get to say something about the gifts of every person in the room. And it is very, very powerful. It is very, very affirming. I don't know about you, but there are a lot of things in my life I would have never been able to do, I would have never thought about doing if somebody didn't look at me and say, you have got to do this. Your future, your destiny rests on whether you hide from this thing or step out. Give them a chance to further their potential. Ask them, what are your dreams? Where do you want to go? A lot of times when folks come in the office, they have a lot of questions, staff people. Well, how do you want this to go? And, the place is so beyond my understanding now, I like to say, I don't know, what are you thinking? Or I have some ideas, but what are you thinking? Really, I don't have any ideas, but I just want to see what they're thinking. And more often than not, what ends up showing up had nothing to do with me and everything to do with them, because they had heart and they had ideas. I've had a lot of fun with this little video clip of the Superman superheroes thing the last few Sundays, and the music, and it comes spinning out, and then it tells you who the superhero is. Well, Gary and Sean and some other people are working on this, and they keep sending them to me. What do you think of this? What do you think of this? And I don't reply, mostly because I don't think my opinion is that important, because I know what they're going to come up with is awesome. If you let them, your people have all kinds of gifts, all kinds of opportunities, and of course, if they don't have the gifts to do what you need them to do, then it goes back to what we talked about last week of, are they in the right seat on the bus? So turn your folks loose, ask them what their dreams and their potential are, which reminds me of something else. I talk to our people routinely, and when we hire a new person, I bring them in and I sit them down, and it scares them, and it's ridiculous. It shouldn't, but I tell them welcome, and I tell them I want you to feel comfortable to come in here anytime and tell me what's on your heart, what's on your mind, to get it out, to say the good things and the bad things and the happy and the sad. This is a safe place for you to say whatever you think. I also tell them that we might have hired you to be the local missions person or the communications person, but what we really want from you, besides those things, is your heart and your brains. And so if you see something that's happening and your brain says, that's not my department, don't do that. If you see something that's going on that you can speak into, step forward. Participate, get your gifts on the table. A really good example of this is we hired Jennifer Muir as the local missions person, and by coincidence, she has a real knack of coming up with ideas for videos. And many of the videos that I think have been really effective, she sat down with Gary and Sean and whoever else. And so I think she's probably just a regular part of that team now. I don't know, but we would have never known that if we didn't create an opportunity for people to live outside of their job description. Leaders help people discover their passion. When I was a young man, they said, be whatever you wanted to be. You know, they had the commercial for the Army, be all that you can be, find your future in the Army. And my parents would talk to me about what did I want to be, and I didn't know what I wanted to be. In fact, when I was in third grade, we were coming out of church, and it was very formal, and the pastor wore all these scary clothes, you know, and we stopped at the door, and we're shaking his hands, and he says, well, young man, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, the football player. And I felt bad, so I said, or a pastor. It was a lie, but I thought it's what happened. These days, I'd like to tell people, pursue your passion, but in this economy, I might tell my kids, get a job, learn how to work, learn how to hold a job, find how to love the job you're doing. And then if you get opportunities along the way to do something that you're passionate about, great. But especially in volunteer organizations, we have to help people find their passion. If Johnny Wells ever comes to me and says, I'm just pooped out on landscape, I can't do it anymore, I'm not going to say to her, you bad girl, you have to stay with landscaping. I'm going to say, okay, well, let's find something for you to be involved in that makes your heart full. And some people join the hospitality team or something, and they come along and they go, oh, this just isn't working for me. Okay. That's fine. Then let's find something that you can be involved in that does make your heart come alive. Bill Hybels has a book called Holy Discontent, and I actually picked this up and was reading it when I was had just taken off from KCI, and they got to the 10,000 feet thing, and everybody kind of chilled and started to calm down. And I'm reading in this book, and he's talking about how God puts passion in the hearts of people, and how your life never finds its place of hope and its real sweet spot until you're connected with your passion. And all of a sudden, big old tears are rolling down my face, you know, because I was just so resonating with, and I have this idea that all sorts of people are looking at me thinking something's wrong with that guy. What is your passion? And what is the passion of the people on your team? At work, at home, whatever. I have a daughter that hates yard work. I don't ask her to do it, because all I'm going to do is crush her and make a problem. She doesn't really like doing the dishes either. We might still be looking for her passion. If somebody has something they want to do that's outside their job description, turn them loose if you can. Some years ago, and a lot of you may know this, at Woods Chapel, we changed our organizational structure from a kind of a hierarchical system with a whole row of committees that you had to go through to get something accomplished to a more permission-giving structure. And now, and for 10 or 11 or 12 years, time flies, new ministries get off the ground so much more easily because all people have to do is answer 3 questions. Here's my idea. Does it fit our mission? Did we talk about this last week? No. Okay. First question is, does it fit our mission? Can you explain in some fashion that this thing is going to connect people to Jesus Christ? The second thing they have to do is who's going to do it? Because a lot of times at churches, people have ideas and then they want to dump them on the staff. I have a great idea. Will you do it? No. I have things to do. I don't need anything else to do, and we're not going to dump that on so-and-so. In fact, if God's calling you, you should be involved in the who of the thing. In fact, the best proposals come, somebody will say, well, I'm going to do it, and I've already got a team of people that are very excited about that. So they take responsibility for whatever it is God has called them to do. The third thing is, how is it going to be funded? And again, people love to have great ideas that are going to somehow be dumped on the church budget. That was never good before, and in this economy, it's impossible. But it goes back to the whole thing, who's going to be responsible? If God's calling you to take a trip to be in mission in Guatemala, then somehow all of that is going to work out. And you and your team can work on the finances and work with the business people in the church and come up with some idea so that everything isn't dumped back into the church budget. But we have had wonderful success with mission and ministry here simply because it's been focused on freeing people to do the things that they are passionate about. What is on your heart? Go do that. And I love talking to new people and telling them, if you don't find something that you love to be involved with, find something you love, and we will help you get that thing going. Yes, sir. Eric. Right.
Someone comes up with this beautiful, fantastic idea, but doesn't have the organizational skills or leadership skills to lead into that project. How does that person get help doing so?
Okay.
I don't know if I may come up with a good idea, but I don't know if I have the time or the effort or the knowledge.
Okay.
It's going to be a fantastic idea for that person who doesn't know how to lead it.
Okay. Do I need to repeat that, or did everybody hear that okay? I'm going to repeat it. You heard it? Okay. Let's say that you mentioned to Sean that you think a men's bowling league is a great idea, but you don't know where to begin, okay? Well, if Sean's got some passion about that, even though he's a staff person, he may step in. And maybe you're sitting around with some guys and you go, you know what? I have this idea. In fact, there are a lot of ideas like that percolate for months and years. That bowling league is one perfect example. It took a well over a year before that thing actually started. And this is what I love about great ideas. If somebody comes with a great idea, it's probably going to find a life here. Because there's something about ministry and there's something about the church that I think is true, is that things keep changing. There are ministries that we were involved in 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Some of them were still there, but others have kind of come and gone. And that's okay. Sometimes you have to let things run their course. And so we always have to be open to new ideas. I hear things from people sometimes, and I think I want to push on that. I want to help make that happen. So if somebody said, I'm not really a leader and I don't know how to put together a proposal, I would invite them to start talking to their friends and see if they can't get something out of that group to where someone would come forward as a leader. But it is a key piece because we can't just plop whatever it is down on staff.
And there's always great leaders that have bad ideas too.
Yeah, there are great leaders that have bad ideas. We've had a few of those come through the years. When you're not sure how it's going to fit the mission, that becomes a very interesting discussion at the meeting. Now, how does this have anything to do with what it is that we're supposed to be doing here? Okay. Leaders have to keep learning. I think we were talking about this in the hallway before we came in, myself and Dale. If you're like me, your IQ is average, hopefully. My kids came home from taking the ACT test. Is that the one they take? Yeah. And I knew what was coming. I knew how this is going to work. And I opened the mail because nobody else opens the mail. And here comes Allie, and she walks in the door after school. And I go, "It's here, it's here." She goes, "What?" I said, "Your ACT." And I pull it open, and I go, "You got an 8? Is that good?" That wasn't very funny. We made our kids take the test over and over again because their scores were fine. You know, they were 20, 21, 22. One of them finally got a 25. But they always feel like they're so insignificant because they have one friend that got a 30, that got a full ride to Mizzou or something. If you're like me, I came from good folks and they were average stock. And so if we're going to stay ahead of the game, if we're going to know how to deal with whatever it is, we have got to keep learning. We have to keep working on the things that we do not know. And I think Sean would probably affirm this. There are a number of things that they do not prepare you for in seminary. And I'll bet in medical school, they don't teach you how to manage people either. But all of the skills that it takes to communicate with people and to walk through problems and to set goals and do reviews and things like that. In my case, we totally had to learn that along the way. I think probably the only person that we have on staff that had the experience and that came naturally to is Sherry Swanson, who was a manager at Sprint or MCI for a number of years. Look at the things that you don't know how to do and work on learning how to do them. Be willing to remake yourself. And again, what are you reading? My wife is a delightful person, and I'm not allowed to make fun of her at church. She reads all the time. She's always on an airplane. She doesn't want a Kindle because you can't read it while the plane's going up or coming down. And so she just wants a regular book, and she goes through at least a book every week, and she's always reading spy mystery things, and I bring her home some of my, honey, here's my latest book on how to do something great or think about something or how to find a heart for this, and she'll take it and say, "Oh, that's great." And there's a whole pile of them over on her desk that have never, it's not her thing. And I'm not going to try to make that her thing. But I think to be a leader, you've got to be reading the things that challenge your brain and stretch your brain and organize your brain. And we can't be afraid of things that take us different places. A few weeks ago, I was writing something in the blog, and a person replied, let me remember what they said. It was a quote of Aristotle, who said, "It's the sign of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without being threatened by it." Some people won't read things that come from a different school or a different place than where their brain is. They want to get in one genre of theology, one genre of how the world works, and they just keep reinforcing that over and over. The people that I have learned the most from are the people that think differently than I do. In fact, whatever your political persuasion is, and one of the things I love about our church is I really don't know what any of your political persuasions are, but I know you have them. Find somebody sometime, and you'll run into them by accident, that thinks differently than you, and take them to lunch or go to dinner and say, I just wanted to talk to you. I heard you saying this, and I want to, I love you. I value you. Tell me why you think that way, and just listen to what they have to say. Well, here are some books on leadership. We mentioned Managing Transitions by William Bridges, and not only can I email you all of this, if you're interested in any of this PowerPoint stuff, I can email you the whole thing. We talked about the starfish and the spider. We had the flight of the buffalo. I think we talked about good to great. Leading Change is a very interesting book by a guy named James O'Toole, and he talks about being the kind of leader that no one knows you're the leader. Leading in such a way that the team wins the game, that the team takes the thing home, and nothing is ever written about the manager. Because it shouldn't be about the attention that we get. It should be about the fact that we had a mission and we pursued it and we got there. I found this book to be very interesting. We mentioned both of those books. Okay. So for whatever reason y'all have come out last week and tonight, I want to just encourage you again that God needs leaders. And that for whatever reason you think you might not be qualified, you probably are. And I encourage you to look inside of yourself, at your passions and your interests, and to just take the first step out to start the journey to be a leader in this world for our Father.